Talk about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. You mentioned it. What is it doing? Of course, the United States and Israel argues that this is going to be UNRWA's replacement.
It is, as I said in the beginning, it is the moral and operational inverse of UNRWA. As you mentioned, UNRWA had 400 sites from which they distributed aid to people in need. UNRWA's aid delivery was based on principles of neutrality, transparency, the dignity of the beneficiaries. And UNRWA, the reason there are 400 sites is because the necessity to bring aid to where people are, and the knowledge that not everybody, and particularly the most vulnerable in the population, can travel to aid sites. And so one of the biggest problems, and really, I believe, intentional operational realities of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was to only have a couple of sites, and as you mentioned, that are in the south, very close to the Egyptian border. And this meant that the only people who could really travel the 9 to 12 kilometers to these sites were those who were young men primarily, who were not disabled or elderly. And then what we've seen is those people seeking aid, those desperate people, then being shot at. And shot at not only by by people working, the mercenaries, the American mercenaries working at GHF, but by the IDF as well, as they queue in lines. You can't call these lines; these are cages, like animals. And I'll talk about the modality. If you could, you can't call modality of how they distribute aid. You can't say distribution. I'll come to that in a second. But what I want to go back to is that the people who are not getting this aid, who do not have access to this aid, are the disabled, are the widows who are left to care for their children, are the orphans, are the elderly. So the most needy in Gaza right now are not able to get that aid. And then when you do, when you are able to make it these 9-12 kilometers, starving, beleaguered, you stand in line, and then at some point, basically somebody says go, and like a real life Squid Games, you have
Yeah.
people racing into an open area to be the first to be thrown food at, and to gather that and fight other people. We've heard of people bringing knives to try to be able to be the first one to that food. And then we've also seen, thanks to the brave testimony of Anthony Aguiar, the 25-year Army veteran and former Green Beret, we know that people are being shot at as they try to seek aid. He mentions war crime after war crime in this setting. He talks about a young boy who came to thank him for being a part of provision of some aid, and then that young boy was shot by the IDF in front of his own eyes. So I beg anybody who's listening who thinks somehow that this killing machine is not happening, please listen to the testimony of Anthony Aguiar. If you have any doubt, please listen. It is essential testimony, and it's one that I have to say, I've heard from many sources that our government right now is refusing to hear and even listen to, just pretending it doesn't exist.
Well, it's just bait. It's luring people to the south. They want to put them in ringed, concentration camps, surrounded by security, everyone vetted, and of course they're trying to preclude any Hamas or any young militants from entering and separating them from the militants. The aid's often handed out at 2 a.m, only for an hour. What's the goal? Where do you see this going? And of course, now we are watching Israel call up reservists to occupy and obliterate, erase, destroy Gaza City.
Yeah. Well, I can absolutely say it is not humanitarian in its goal. If this was a humanitarian operation, the dignity of the beneficiaries would be front and center. If this was a humanitarian operation, we wouldn't only be talking about the delivery of food. And mind you, we have heard that the food is lentils and rice and things that require water, which in and of themselves are water is hard to get. So these are not necessarily the materials you would be providing a population that has trouble accessing water and that is facing malnutrition and starvation. This wouldn't be the first thing they should necessarily eat. If this were a humanitarian operation, it wouldn't just be food, it would be medicine. It wouldn't just be food, it would be medicine, and it would be shelter items. If this was a humanitarian operation trying to corral people into what they're also called so-called humanitarian cities in the South, there would be plans for education of the children. There would be plans outside of simply feeding people. There would be talk about setting up medical clinics. None of that has been part of the GHF plan. And when you ask about the ultimate goal, the Israeli government, this extremist government, Kahanist government, has said the quiet part out loud. They consistently, if only people in the U.S. would listen to their own words. Smotrich, Minister Smotrich himself said that our goal is to take the population to the south and then make life so horrible for them that they will either leave on their own accord out of Gaza and into Egypt, and or they would be forcibly displaced, essentially ongoing ethnic cleansing to remove them from Gaza. They've said that out loud. So it's no surprise to any of us who are paying attention to their own words. And mind you, they've also called Gaza's children animals, children of darkness, snakes, that there are no innocent children. Should not be surprising to any of us what GHF, this Israel and U.S.-backed GHF, is doing, given the words of Israeli leaders themselves.
And the response of the international community and the UN.
Yeah, so UNRWA has been very clear. Most of the UN has been very clear that this is not how humanitarian aid is done. This is really, the war crimes that somebody like Anthony Aguar has witnessed, that many, I hate to even focus on him because how many Palestinians have been saying this but have not been believed. But I think it's really important to note that this is a new era. If we're talking about for-profit aid distribution, we're talking about weaponized aid distribution. Actually, before that, even weaponized hunger on purpose, starvation of a population to make them so weak and terrified and beleaguered that the hope is from the Israeli side that they leave. This is really new, and this is something that unfortunately could be modeled in Sudan. It could be taken to other places, and we're seeing kind of the end of an international, of an idea that even in war there are rules. And a kind of post-World War II ideology that even in war there are rules, that there are understanding of international human rights and rule of law. So generally the international community has been against this, but I think it's Chris, I don't know what else to say except to call it a kind of evil rope-a-dope. It's trying to talk about aid to get people on board. So now you have this kind of, you have the GHF saying, hey, don't you want to help people? Meanwhile, they created the very conditions in which people are suffering and being killed. So it's just an evil rope-a-dope. And now we have other humanitarian organizations having to make a decision. Do I do the moral and the right thing, which is not give any credence to this organization or work anywhere near them? Or do I do what they may think is the moral thing and just flood the zone, even if it means working with such an entity as GHF? I think that's what some of the international community are contending with at this very moment.